Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. And my name is Ruby Mehta, VP of Sales at CareSmartz, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's live webinar. It's all about compliance stuff. We will be unpacking some of the most common and costly wage and hour issues affecting agencies in California and how to stay ahead of them. And it's amazing to see so many of you joining this session. I know people will still join in the next few minutes, but as I said, the session is being recorded. Quick pulse check. Just type yes in the chat. If your agency is based in California or works with caregivers in the state. David. Oh, thank you. Okay, I see lots of yeses coming in here. So you are in the right place, everyone. This is the right webinar.
Sure, they're all my clients, so sure.
All right. Okay. Yes, Susan, I agree. Bob is great.
Susan's just happy because I referred a client to her recently. That's all. That's all. Let's be honest.
Love it. I'll start with a quick thought here, everyone. So when you hear wage and hour compliance, what is the first emotion that comes to mind? Is it stress? Is it confusion? Or maybe confidence? Just drop your word in the chat. Confusion, Susan. Can't agree more.
Ugh is usually the reaction I get as their attorney, but either way, it's fine. We'll take it either way.
Yeah. Definitely right place, everyone. Yeah, David, we'll come to that. Yeah, it definitely depends. Mixed responses. And that's the goal today, everyone, to move from stress, confusion, maybe it depends on something, to confidence. That's the goal today. It's just learning for the next 1 hour, sharing ideas, sharing thoughts, and Bob, who's no introduction needed, but he is here to help us here today. So let's get started now. A few quick housekeeping notes before we dive in. The session is being recorded. We'll share the link at the end of the session, mostly within a day or two. All attendees are muted at this time just to reduce background noise, and we will handle Q&A at the end of the session. But please feel free to drop your questions in the chat anytime. There is a Q&A section as well. Chat is also fine. Wherever you feel comfortable, just drop in your thoughts as we go along.
Hey, Ruby, I'll just interject. I personally prefer questions as we go along because it's fresh in our mind and it's more of a conversation that way. So I would say anybody who wants to raise your hand or chat in or use the chat and pop in a question, I think that's better. I think it provides for a more informative webinar if that's all right with you.
Perfect. Yes, I'll keep an eye on this chat box then. Everyone, feel free to drop in your questions while we are on that topic. Here's what we are going to cover today. Very quick introduction to CareSmartz, just so you know who we are and who is the host of this webinar. And then we dive into the key problem areas and risks in wage and hour compliance. We have Bob King from Legal Nanny, who is
legally Nanny.
Legally Nanny. Thank you.
Happens all the time. It's okay.
We'll share legal insights and real cases examples here, followed by practical strategies and tools to help your agency stay compliant. That's the whole agenda for today. We'll stay on this topic as Bob suggested. Drop your questions while we are on the topic, and I will keep an eye on this chat box. You all can see that. I'm joined today with Bob King, a trusted legal expert socializing in employment law and home care compliance. I will be moderating today's discussion, helping guide your questions and making sure we cover the issues that matter most to agency owners and administrators. That's our topic. That's what we are doing for the next hour. This is real quick. This is what CareSmartz is. It's the technology company at CareSmartz. Our goal is to make care delivery and compliance easier for agencies of every size. We work with startups, we work with mid-size agencies, we work with large-size agencies, we work with independents, we work with franchisees, we work with everyone. Our AI-driven, HIPAA-compliant platform streamlines everything from scheduling to billing to caregiver communication, EVV. If you are interested, you can reach out to me. You can send me a direct message at the end of it. You will have our contact information handy. So coming to the topic now, this is why we are here today. I'll start, Bob, here. From unpaid on-call time to rounding, the off-the-clock work, even small inconsistencies in timekeeping can lead to major penalties. And I have learned this from so many agency owners and administrators that I have worked with over the last 10 years. Break and travel pay miscalculations sometimes, or minimum wage shortfalls. Can stack violations and can spiral fast, right? So Bob, can you share what you are seeing most often in agency audits or lawsuits?
Sure. So first of all, Ruby, thank you, and thank you to CareSmartz for hosting the webinar today. I've done so many of these webinars, and I love that you actually encourage people to chat in and like are interactive in that way. It's sort of like a call and response, and I've not seen it before, but I love it. Folks, I am here to answer your questions. I'm here to talk about everything we have on these slides or whatever else you want to talk about. My name is Bob King. I am the founder and an attorney at Legally Nanny. We specialize in representing home care agencies and nanny agencies and family employers. So I know exactly what you do. And we represent home care agencies, hundreds of home care agencies here in California, as well as nationwide. And I deal with wage and hour stuff all the time. And what's crazy is I've been a lawyer for 27 years. My practice used to be about half and half, writing documents like severance agreements, handbooks, and doing advice and counsel, and the other half defending people in litigation, labor commissioner, administrative hearings, single plaintiff cases, class action, PAGA, etc. Now it's 80-20 at least. We've seen an explosion in litigation. It seems it's all I do. Because of PAGA. And PAGA is the California Private Attorneys General Act. It allows for penalties on behalf of all employees who have worked for you for the past year. The penalties stack, and it can easily turn a tiny incident into a six-figure liability. So we're here to talk to you about the things that really are the gotcha elements of a PAGA case, or that you don't think about. You're trying to do it right, but you, for whatever reason, fall into a trap. Also, please, this webinar goes for an hour. Listening to me talk for an hour is the definition of intentional infliction of emotional distress. So please stop, chat in so you give Ruby a chance to talk or whatever, but I want your questions. I really, really want your questions. I want this to be interactive. So let's take this first bullet, rounding. While technically legal under California law, it is only legal if it does not detriment the employee. I have never seen a case where it does not detriment the employee. Not one. So I'm telling you right now, if you're on this webinar and you are rounding time, stop doing that immediately. The problem with it is, it is basically impossible to defend. Okay, that's the issue that you have, because it's obvious to a plaintiff's counsel when they look at it that there's rounding going on, because it's not like you're turning on a light switch and turning off a light switch at exact times. Humans are humans, and so they arrive 2 minutes early, they stay 2 minutes late, whatever it may be. Okay, so but if you round time, you'll find what happens is caregivers usually get there a little early, 2-3 minutes early, but they leave right on the dot. Okay, and so then if you round those things, chances are you're rounding to the detriment of the employee. Not intentionally. I'm not saying anybody's trying to steal time, but what I'm saying to you is, when statisticians review these materials, they realize consistently that rounding is a problem. So please, I beg of you, pay to the minute. Now I know that's a pain. I'm going to say a lot of things today that you're going to hate. You're going to hate me at the end of this webinar. That's okay. Okay. I'm just telling you what the law is. All right. And I know because clients are going to be like, hey, I booked a shift for 8 hours, not 8 hours and 1 minute or 8 hours and 2 minutes or whatever. And so you have to decide, are you going to bill that extra 1 or 2 minutes or are you not? I'm agnostic to that, but I'm telling you, you ought to pay it regardless of whether or not you bill it. So please stop rounding. Okay. Off the clock work is a pain in the neck. So the way you deal with that is pretty simple. You have a policy that requires employees to accurately log their time. Okay. And so that way, if some employee says, oh, well, I worked an extra half an hour, the response from me is, look, I relied on you. You told me what time you worked and I paid you for it. And then also, of course, you want a policy that prohibits working off the clock. That's the best you're going to do on the unpaid off the clock time. But generally, when you see a cause of action in a complaint that says unpaid hours worked or unpaid minimum wage, they're really not talking about off the clock work so much. They're really talking about the rounding issue more so than anything. Okay. Unpaid on call. Okay. On call have to be two of the words that will set off home care agency owners more so than any I've ever heard in the English language. It is the most vexing thing that you folks deal with because you run a 24/7 operation. You have to have somebody on call. And so what do? Some people outsource it. That's never, in my experience, a good solution. I shouldn't say never. That's usually not a good solution because they don't understand your business. It's hard for them to staff if they're not involved with it. Okay. I'm going to tell you right now the single best thing you can do for on-call. Okay. This is your golden nugget in the first 15 minutes of this webinar. If you have on call, please staff it with an exempt employee. Boom. Staff it with an exempt employee. Why? Because then you don't have to worry about any of this nonsense that we're going to talk about. You don't have to worry about recording hours and overtime and meal periods and rest periods and everything else. And when I say on call, I mean the person actually taking the calls. I don't mean the caregiver is actually going out to the client's home. So I'm telling you, I'm begging you, staff an exempt employee on call. You may consider, and I have had actually a number of people do this, hire a specific person, one person as an exempt employee to handle all of your on call. Okay. That is, I'm seeing that surprisingly more and more because managers are burnt out. They don't want to handle the phone over the weekend or whatever. I don't really care how you do it, but my advice is to staff an exempt employee on call. If you staff a non-exempt employee on call, beware. The first rule of thumb is they have to be able to engage in their personal pursuits while they're on call if you don't want to pay for all the on-call time. Generally, you never pay for all the on-call time. Okay, you are only paying for their actual hours worked, okay? Unless they're so busy that they can't engage in their personal pursuits. And I'm using that phrase particularly because it's from the case law. So then the trouble is getting them to actually log their time while they're on call. And that means every phone call, every email, they're logging it, okay? And that counts as hours worked for the day and the work week, okay? So if you've already staffed somebody in the office for 40 hours and then you staff them on call on the weekend and they're an office employee, guess what? All the on-call time is overtime, okay? And you have to track that. And they also are entitled to an unpaid meal period for every 30 minutes worked and a paid 10-minute rest period for every 4 hours worked during each workday. So please be careful of that. If you have an insane day, you may trigger meal or rest period obligations as well as overtime or even double time obligations. So please be careful and make sure your employees, when they work on call, are actually tracking their hours. Okay, so we get a whole bunch of questions I see. So let's go through some of these. I love you all for these questions because I get paid by the question. So this is great. I have a kid that I still have to put through college. We're rocking here. Okay. Okay. When you mean with an exempt employee, is that someone who is salary? Yes, that's what I mean. Now, to be exempt, they have to pass 2 tests. They have to pass the salary test, which means they have to earn a fixed salary of twice the minimum wage, which currently requires a salary of 68,000, I want to say 640 or something like that, but it's 68 grand and change. That's going up as of January 1 though. Okay, so if you tell me, oh, I have an exempt employee and I pay her $45,000 a year, you do not have an exempt employee because you haven't met the salary basis test. And then the other requirement to be exempt is the duties test, which means they have to supervise 2 or more individuals, exercise discretion or independent judgment. The duties test usually is not that hard for a manager because when they're on call, they're supervising literally all of your employees. And of course, they're exercising discretion and independent judgment because they're the ones calling the shots. So generally speaking, it's not that hard to satisfy the duties test, but you do have to satisfy the salary test as well. Is an exempt employee always a full-time person? No. You could have a part-time person who's exempt, but that's going to be an expensive part-time person because again, you have to meet the salary duties test, whether they work 1 hour, 10 hours, 30 hours, or 50 hours in a week. Can we have exempt staff to handle on-call all 7 days, after hours, weekends? Yes, absolutely. Sure you can. That's not a problem. Yes, you can do that. And I know agencies that are doing that. I think candidly, it's a bit much. I would try and split that just from a practical standpoint. Can you pay someone part-time exempt? Yes. Again, if as long as you meet the duties test and the salaries test, it doesn't matter how many hours you can work them. So that's the beauty of it. You could work them 50 hours, 60 hours, doesn't matter. You can work them 30 hours if you want. It doesn't matter. What if an employee is offshore out of USA? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so the laws of the jurisdiction where the employee is apply. Okay, so that's the issue you have. So if they're in Missouri, the Missouri law is going to apply. And let me step back and say, I'm only licensed to practice here in California. All I'm talking about here is California law and federal law, but I can't advise you on any other state law outside of California. Okay. Can you, employer, ask an exempt employee to bank hours? Oh, I see. Meaning like if they work 50 hours this week, they only work 30 hours the prior week. So for exempt employees, again, it doesn't matter. You can work them whatever hours and give them whatever hours off you want. You can never bank hours with non-exempt employees. And when I say non-exempt, I mean hourly. Okay. But exempt employees basically do whatever you want. Can we have virtual assistant from overseas for on-call? Sure, if you want to do that, but the risk that I've encountered with agencies that do that is if you don't have someone who truly knows the nuts and bolts of your business, my sense is it could be problematic. But is it legal to do it? Sure. Can on-call be compliantly handled by a 1099 contractor instead of an exempt employee? Okay, that's an excellent question. So California has, by the way, talking to me is like drinking out of a fire hose. So if you need me to repeat something because I'm speaking quickly or whatever, I am happy to do it. And by the way, this is awesome. We have a whole bunch of slides. We're going to be here till next Tuesday. So good to go. Okay, so all right. California has what's known as an ABC test. And an ABC test presumes, under California law, that all workers are employees, not independent contractors, unless they meet all 3 prongs of the independent contractor test. Okay. The first prong is, does the work form an essential component of what you do? And so I would tell you, you are not going to find a 1099 contractor to do on-call. Because why? Because on-call is an essential element of what you do. And by the way, another aspect is they have to have it as sort of their independent business. Most people aren't independent business to do on-call unless it's a call center. Okay, so I would tell you that no, you should only hire employees and it should only be an employee-employer relationship. What about an hourly employee? Can they ask you to bank hours? If no, what law does that fall under? Well, California law requires that you pay workers, non-exempt employees, on an hourly basis, and you must calculate that on a per workday and per work week basis. So you can't just say, hey, you work 50 hours this week, you work 30 hours next week, and I'll just pay everything as straight time. That's illegal. Why? Because California law requires you to calculate overtime on a workday and work week basis. You can't just shift time over. That's why. Okay. What if you're paying another company to do it, though? Paying another company for on-call or even other administrative compliance functions? Sure. Okay, that's different, okay? Because there, you're not contracting with a, when I read the prior question, I understood it to mean they were contracting with an individual. If you are using a company that provides a call center, I'm not worried about it. Have at it. Go ahead and do that. That's fine. Okay, why? Because you are contracting with not an individual, but a call center, and a call center is what they do. So I think that's fine. Again, though, you have to consider the practical elements. Do they really understand your business? Are they going to be empathetic? Do they get it? Okay. All right. You wanna lead in on the next one, Ruby, or you want me to start going on the next one? You tell me.
No, we can, we have two questions on LinkedIn as well. I'm also observing the LinkedIn Live.
God bless. Okay.
So the first one is, how would it work to staff an exempt employee on call only? Isn't there a requirement for them to supervise two people?
Yes. So, okay. So to be exempt, again, you have to pay the minimum salary that we discussed, twice the minimum wage. And then the other prong is you have to satisfy the duties test. Okay. There are three ways to do that. One is a professional exemption for licensed individuals, doctors, lawyers. That doesn't apply to home care. Then there are two, so there's two remaining. One is the executive exemption, and the executive exemption is, you're exactly right. You have to supervise two or more employees. You have to exercise discretion and independent judgment, and you have to undertake duties that are vital to the management of the enterprise. Okay. And I would tell you that your on-call supervisor is in fact supervising literally all of your caregivers because he or she is the only one on duty at that time. And I would say they have a supervisory role satisfying that two or more requirements. So that's my response to that. There is another way to be exempt. It's called the administrative exemption. That's generally for what I will call silos, discrete areas of business within your company. So payroll, HR, IT, those sorts of things. You can make someone exempt if they meet certain qualifications for that as well. But generally, your on-call person is going to be an exempt manager that you would staff during the day, and you would also staff the person overnight or on the weekends. Okay.
Okay, let's move on.
All right. All right. There are some, did you see there's someone who's trying to get in though? Did you see that on the last here?
In a
So I see what it is. Yes, it's recorded. Yes.
yeah, it's being recorded. Yeah. So we
Okay.
continue recording. There is
Okay.
one more, but I think you answered that question earlier.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it is. It's about the 30 minutes of work. So if somebody only works for 30 minutes, assuming that they're not so busy that they can engage in their own personal pursuits, you only have to pay for the actual time worked, which should be 30 minutes. That also, by the way, assumes that you're not requiring them to go into someplace. If you require them to be at a certain place at a certain time, that's entirely different, and you probably would have to pay for the on-call time. But if they could be on a beach in Aruba or in Vegas and just answering calls with a laptop, you're fine. Did you want to go back to the prior slide, Ruby, or do you want me to take on this slide? You tell me.
Oh, the prior slide
The prior slide had a couple other ones.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. Let me just quickly hit this. Okay.
Yeah.
For your caregivers, assuming they work in a private home and they spend 80% of their time supervising, feeding, dressing, and other activities of daily living involving a senior or a disabled individual, your caregivers are what are known as personal attendants under Wage Order 15. I'll tell you right now, after this webinar, the first thing you should do is search all of your employee documents, your handbook, anything else, you got job descriptions. If you don't find the words personal attendant in your employee documents, you're doing something wrong, okay? That is the backbone of our industry, and it astonishes me every day when I pick up stuff and I'm trying to defend people and they have no definition of what a personal attendant is. Please make sure you have that in your documents. If they are personal attendants, listen clearly. They are not entitled to meal periods and they are not entitled to rest periods. Full stop. None of that applies to personal attendant caregivers working in private homes. The only overtime they're entitled to is after 9 hours in a day, not 8, 9, and after 40 hours in a week, not 45. Some of you will tell me, well, California law says 45. You're right. Federal law currently says 40. That may change to, and if federal law goes away for the overtime, then it would be 9 and 45. But currently, your caregivers are entitled to overtime after 9 hours in a workday under California law and after 40 hours in a work week under federal law. Okay, so that's the breaks, that's the overtime. Travel pay. Please be careful about this. If a caregiver goes from one work location to another work location in the same work day, you are required to reimburse mileage for that caregiver, and you are required to pay for the caregiver's time, and that time counts as hours worked. So for example, if you staff a caregiver for 4 hours in the morning, and then there's a half an hour of travel time, and then she works for 5 hours for another client, She hasn't worked 9 hours that day. She's worked 9.5 hours that day because of the half an hour of travel time, which counts as hours worked, which also bumps you into overtime. Okay, so please, now I'm not talking about commuting time. Commuting time is from the caregiver's home to the first work site of the day and from the last work site of the day to the caregiver's home. That is not compensable. You do not pay for that time. You do not reimburse mileage for that time. Okay, so that's how travel time works. Okay. Is it mandatory that on-call from overseas be HIPAA compliant and provide a W-9? I don't specialize in HIPAA. I'm not even convinced necessarily that HIPAA applies to all non-medical home care agencies, but it is not my area of the law. I don't advise anybody on HIPAA, so I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. But hold on. Okay. What about double time? If your caregiver is a personal attendant working in a private home, there is no double time. The only overtime is after 9 hours in a workday and after 40 hours in a work week. That's it. There's no other overtime. There's no other double time. Can you please talk about premium pay, waiting time between two shifts? Well, okay, so I don't know what you mean by premium pay. What I can tell you is this. If you're paying a caregiver to wait, then sure, that's hours worked and you must pay them as if they were working. Okay, but let me give you an example. If you work a caregiver from 8 a.m. to noon and then they don't work again for you until 4 p.m., you're obviously not paying them from noon to 4, okay? But you are paying their travel time to get from the first client to the second client. Now, obviously, they're not going directly because it's a 4-hour gap. So what do? You use software to estimate it. You have a policy that tells your employees you're doing that. And you say, hey, if you disagree, let us know. Same for the mileage. What if there's a 2-hour gap between shifts? It doesn't matter. You still have to pay the travel time. Okay, you have to pay the travel time and you have to reimburse the mileage if they're going from one work location to another in the same work day. Even if they don't go directly, then you use the software to estimate. Do overnight employees get inter-visit mileage if they work overnight shifts? We have our overnight shifts split at midnight. So for example, if a caregiver is working 10 to 6, it would be 10 to midnight one day, midnight to 6 the other day. Would this constitute as intervisit considering it is 2 different shifts within 24 hours, 12 a.m.? Okay, so I don't know what you mean by intervisit, but if you're asking, do you have to pay travel time when they keep going back to that same client? No, no. But I understand that point. Like if you're saying, okay, they work 10 to 6, so 10 to midnight one day, midnight to 6 the next day, and then it starts up again at 10. I would not pay travel. You don't pay travel time on consecutive overnight shifts, if that's the question. Okay, continuing along. By the way, I love wage and hour. See, by the way, just as an aside, I do all sorts of employment law. I do discrimination, harassment, retaliation. I love wage and hour because I can diagnose it immediately, and it's black or white. Either you're doing it right or you're not. There's no he said, she said, and like talking about this stuff, it makes my day. Okay, do caregivers get double time after 12 hours? No, they don't. Remember, not if they're personal attendants, okay? If they are not working in a private home or they don't meet the 80% duties test, sure. But I'm talking about caregivers who are personal attendants working in private homes. That is the norm for caregivers in California. If they have a patient in the morning and then one in the evening and have free time in the middle, how does that work for paid time? Right, that's what we were talking about. So you pay the time it takes for them to get from one place to the other, even if they're not going directly from one place to the other. You estimate it, okay? They don't teleport. You have to pay them for that. Okay, can overtime be paid on a per calendar day basis? I'm mostly asking about overnight shifts. A one-time 8P to 8A shift would not accrue OT until they go back the next consecutive night. Right, so here's the deal. A workday is 24 consecutive hours, okay? California law lets you designate the workday as long as you do it for all employees, you intend it to be permanent, and you're not trying to circumvent overtime rules in choosing the start and end of the workday. If you don't choose when the workday begins and ends, the default under California law is midnight. Okay, most agencies, in my experience, use midnight as the cutoff for the workday. But in answer to your question, you can choose whatever workday start you want as long as it's for all employees you intended to be permanent and you're not trying to circumvent overtime. But most people use midnight because it's the default under California law, so you know you're safe. And I think that's reasonable as well. Did you say personal attendants do not get a meal? Or, well, sorry, I'm losing it here. Okay, did you say personal attendants do not get a meal or 10-minute break? That's right. That's exactly what I said because they're not entitled to it. So if they work at a facility, does double time apply? You bet it does, because a facility is not considered a private home. I'm not going to go into all the rules of working in a facility. That is a complicated thing, but treat a facility, a caregiver working in a facility, just like a worker in your office, okay? If we are not sure we paid travel time and mileage in the past, would you suggest just do it going forward or audit all back pay? Okay, that's an excellent question. And what I would tell you is, if you haven't done it already, every single one of you on this call should be doing a PAGA audit, okay? And because that's part of the legal changes last year with PAGA, and what that means is you can dramatically reduce your potential penalties if you do have liability in a PAGA lawsuit, if you do a PAGA audit before you're sued. Even after you're sued, if you do it within 60 days, you can still significantly reduce your penalties. So I say that because if I were you, I would tell you, you should do an audit, which would uncover this, and then I would pay it. I would at least pay it a year going back, because that's the statute of limitations on a PAGA case. It's it's a 3-year statute of limitations on classes, but it can be extended to 4 years if plaintiff's counsel alleges a claim for unfair business practices, which they all do. So as a practical matter, it's 4 years. If it were me, I would go back audit. If it weren't a lot of money, I would pay the travel time and mileage going back at least a year, and ideally 4 years. Okay. For employees working at a day program who also work in a private home within the same day or week, which wage order do you follow? That's incredibly difficult. I hate it when there are 2 wage orders that apply during the week. What I would tell you is I err on the side of being conservative, and I would treat them as a non-personal attendant, because you have to look on a weekly basis. Did they spend 80% of the time in that work week on personal attendant duties? My sense is the day period is going to push them over, and you're going to lose the personal attendant exemption. I would implore you to try and keep personal attendants and non-personal attendant work separate. I know that's easier said than done, but I'm just telling you. But then we're circumventing OT laws for NOC shifts. No, you're not. If you use midnight as your default, it's totally fine. It's the default under California law. Okay, so and by the way, it's what most software uses as well. So it's totally fine. When I say circumventing, I mean you're picking some sort of weird time that a bulk of your caregivers are working to try and somehow short them out of overtime. So you're fine. For our employees who receive intervisit pay, time pay, and mileage, do we need to additionally give a split shift premium? Okay. I'm going to be quick on this because it's now 10:34. We're on slide 1. But here's the deal. This is in the weeds, so I'm going to try and go slowly on this. But we discussed that during the workday, when a caregiver goes from one location to another, you always, one work location to another, not commuting time, you always must pay travel time, and you always must reimburse mileage. Those are non-negotiables. Now, if there is an unpaid break in the workday that the caregiver did not request, you also have to analyze whether or not you owe a split shift penalty of 1 hour of pay at the minimum wage. And this is an excellent example of something people don't know about, or they calculate incorrectly, and then they get sued in PAGA, and it results in 6 figures of liability. So what do I mean? Okay, take our example. Caregiver works from 8 a.m. to noon, and then from 4 to 8. Different clients. 4-hour gap in the middle of the day. Now, if the caregiver said, hey, I need that gap because I need to deal with my kids after school, note it in the caregiver's file, don't pay a split shift. Most caregivers, this is not the case. They did not ask for this gap. You scheduled it. Therefore, you would pay travel time, you'd reimburse mileage, and you would owe 1 hour of pay at the applicable minimum wage, either local or state, whichever is higher, that applies as a split shift penalty. However, you can offset that split shift penalty by anything you pay above the minimum wage, not including overtime. This is where I'm going to lose you people, because it's going to make your head explode. But let me give you the easiest example. That 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon. Let's just say California minimum wage applies. It's currently $16.50. If you pay 3 hours above the minimum wage, okay, 3 hours above the minimum wage, $3 above the minimum wage, times 8 hours worked, that's $24. That's above the $16.50 penalty that you would owe. You would not owe any penalty in that instance. Okay. If you pay $2 above the minimum wage, leaving aside the travel time, which also would count as hours worked, but let's just call it a flat 8. So $2 above the minimum wage times 8 hours worked is 16. The penalty is $16.50. You would owe a 50-cent split shift penalty there. Again, though, you probably wouldn't because you also have to consider the travel time. If I've thoroughly confused people, now we can move on. But yes, I'm telling you now, you do have to consider a split shift penalty as a possibility when there is an unpaid break in the workday that the caregiver did not request. Okay. Okay.
I want to
Okay.
say there are more questions than we can handle in this.
Yeah. Yep. Actually, I'm going to do this real quick. Double time never. Okay. Whether double time applies or not depends if they're a personal attendant. Okay. If they're not a personal attendant, no double time. If they are, double time. Okay. Okay. And all right, so let's go on. Okay, and by the way, yes, I do have a template in an audit, but we sell that. That's part of our proprietary stuff. So if you want that, well, I've developed a PAGA audit checklist from my years and years and years of defending these claims. I defend like 1 or 2, I mediate at least 1 or 2 a month. I probably have 20 on my docket now at least. We sell that, so you can contact me. I'm happy to give it to you. Then you do the audit and I review your findings. So if you want that PAGA audit checklist, contact us. We sell it. Happy to do it.
Bob, there is a question on LinkedIn. What if they work 7 days, any double time?
Right. Again, double time seems to be the flavor of the day here. I'm going to say this one more time. The only overtime or double time that a personal attendant is entitled to is after 9 hours in a workday and after 40 hours in a work week. There's no double time if they're a personal attendant. If they're not a personal attendant because they're not in a private home or because they don't meet the 80% duties test, sure, there's a whole bunch of overtime and double time that applies. But the initial threshold question is, are they a personal attendant? If so, no double time. Okay.
Okay. Should we move on? And
Sure,
then
by all means. Yep,
we
yep.
can take care
No,
of.
we're good with this. I love it. And by the way, I love all these questions. I really do. It gets me going in the morning. So keep going.
Okay.
God, you want to give an overview on this, or you want me to roll on?
For sure. Yes. So one of the biggest red flags we see is misclassification, treating caregivers as contractors. That opens agencies up to back wage claims and penalties. Bonuses, stipends, and travel pay also have to be factored into overtime correctly, right? Or agencies risk underpayment of claims. So, Bob, my question here is how can agencies audit these risks before they become real issues?
Okay, caregivers are never independent contractors, period, full stop. And in fact, if you check our socials tomorrow, you're going to see on our social media tomorrow a press release from California Attorney General Rob Bonta, who socked an agency with a massive fine for calling its caregivers independent contractors. Your caregivers are always employees. Period, full stop. They have to be as part of your license, okay? Anybody who talks about a caregiver who is an independent contractor is doing it illegally. I have nothing more to say to you on that. It's very, very simple. I really want to get to this second bullet because this is important. But if you want to overview it, go ahead.
No.
Or you want me to just hit it?
Yeah, please.
All right, great. Okay. Oh, by the way, I just see one quick question that I can deal with easily. It says, I have a live-in case that wants our caregiver to take a non-paid meal break. Your caregiver, if she's a personal attendant, is not entitled to that break. So you don't pay the penalty because she's not entitled to it in the first place. Okay. All right. So bonuses and stipends. Okay. This is another area that will constantly get you in trouble. I see it in every PAGA case. Almost no one does it right, and it leads to liability. If you are paying a bonus that is work-related, i.e., it's tied to some work-related metric, meaning you weren't late this quarter, or it's, hey, I'm calling you on short notice, so I'm going to give you an extra $50, or I'm going to give you whatever, or it's a long drive, or it's night, or it's couples care, or it's difficult client. Am I proving my bona fides when I tell you all these things? I know what you do, okay? So if you give them a bonus for anything that's work-related, that bonus, and same thing for stipends, if it's work-related, so if you pay somebody a stipend to work on call, for example, or to be on call, goes into the regular rate for overtime calculation purposes. So say you pay a caregiver $20 an hour. Most people understand that the overtime rate for that caregiver is $30 an hour. However, if you paid that caregiver $25 as a bonus because she took a last-minute shift, then you have to add that bonus into the total compensation for the week, divide that by the number of hours worked for the week, and that gives you your regular rate. So that overtime rate is not going to be $30, it's going to be $30.12 or something, because you have to account for the bonus that was work related that you gave. Okay. And by the way, here's the other thing that everybody screws up. You have to pay sick leave at the regular rate. So everybody makes the mistake of paying sick leave for whatever the person would have earned had they worked that day. No, you pay sick leave at the regular rate, which also includes these bonuses. Okay, so please be careful. Now, the exception to this, though, is a discretionary bonus is a bonus that is not tied to work-related metrics. So it's a holiday bonus. If you walk in and say, Merry Christmas, everybody gets $100, that doesn't go into the regular rate, okay? So it is taxed, it does have to go through payroll, but it's not going into the regular rate for overtime. And by the way, it doesn't matter how you pay these bonuses. If you hand out a gas card for $25, that, first of all, that's wrong because it should go through payroll, but second, that also goes into the regular rate if you did it for work-related purposes. So please be careful, okay? Okay, I'm not gonna talk more about split shifts. I appreciate the question, but that's gonna bog us down. And it's 10:43, so I got to move it a little bit more on this. So please, though, be careful on bonuses and stipends. Unpaid travel, roundup, missed breaks. Okay, right. So again, I think we talked about the last bullet here, but please be careful, because these, you had on the prior slide something about penalty stacking, and I want to just give you the horror show on this, okay, for everybody listening, because I just had it happen with a client who didn't pay sick time appropriately, okay, and because he gave out bonuses. Well, here's what happens. You owe the actual amounts owed to those employees for what you should have paid in sick time. Now that's the change in your pocket. It's negligible. It was, in our case, it was under $10,000 because you go back 4 years, so it was nothing. But their pay stubs were wrong because it didn't accurately reflect the sick time. So there's penalties for that. The PAGA penalties kick in. So that's $50 for the first instance, $100 for each additional instance of every single time that happened for every single employee. Okay. Plus, if plaintiff's counsel recovers anything, they also get their attorney's fees. Okay. So they could recover $100 and get $10,000 in attorney's fees. So these, and if these employees are no longer working for you because you didn't pay them all wages owed at the time of termination, i.e. you still owed them a little bit of money for sick time, you owe penalties of up to 30 days wages for any employee who's no longer worked for you, who you underpaid for sick time. So that 10,000 became a six-figure number, okay, in terms of easy liability, guaranteed, automatic, not even debatable, before any other rocks were turned over. So please, I beg you, do a PAGA audit, make sure everything's right. Okay. I'm good.
And Bob, we will send a link to buy your audit kit.
Well, no. I mean, it's just me. They have to contact me, and they have to sign up with our firm and be a client, because we don't give that out. They have to pay for that. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. That's what I meant.
Sure. Yeah. Just send them now. So we're happy to help. Yep.
Yeah. Contact information and a link.
Sure.
Okay.
It's just it's a PAGA audit checklist. It's the best way to describe it. Okay. So this is what we were talking about. These PAGA cases will go into 6 figures, 7 figures easy. And by the way, it's all math, because these plaintiffs' lawyers say, well, how many work weeks is it? Oh, I get $20 a work week. That's always what I get. And it's all public, so they're all competing with each other for ego. And they're not going to settle something for $5 a work week or whatever. They're just not, unless you have a genuine inability to pay. And when I say genuine, I mean not only the agency, but you personally. And I'm talking tax returns, profit and loss statements, balance sheets, the whole 9 yards for the agency and you personally. You might be able to get an individual settlement on that. I do those, okay, sometimes if it's justified. But I'm warning you, these penalties are serious. Okay, we talked about breaks and unpaid travel. The documentation. So documents are a lawyer's best friend. I implore you to make sure that your handbook is up to date, that you've got a valid job description. Make sure that you have the words personal attendant in your employee documents, and that you're covered, because there will be claims on these issues, and you want to be able to defend yourself. And the first place I look is, are the policies in place to help us get there? All right. Go ahead. You jump in anytime you want, Ruby, or I can do this too. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, no, let's talk about prevention now. We have talked about all these compliance and penalties, but how do agencies standardize how time is tracked, reviewed, and approved? And also train their managers to identify and escalate those red flags. So let's talk
Sure,
about
it should be all automated. Okay, so like
that.
employee first, you want to look at a policy that requires employees to track their time, prohibits working off the clock. You have that. Okay, cool. Then it should be automated, and you should get an immediate flag. For example, if an office employee doesn't take a meal period, you should know it immediately, and you should pay 1 hour of pay for that day for the missed meal period. Okay, so please be careful about that. And by the way, California rules are very strict on these things. So California says they're entitled to a 30-minute unpaid meal period for every 5 hours worked. What does that mean? That means if they take a meal period for 29 minutes, it doesn't count. It's as if they didn't take it. If they take a meal period at hour 7, it doesn't count. It's as if they didn't take it. So it's imperative that you make sure they take the required breaks for the required times during the required periods. Otherwise, it's useless. And you pay 1 hour of pay as a premium for any day they didn't take the required break, and you pay an additional hour of pay for any day they didn't take the required meal period. However, it doesn't matter how many breaks they missed in a day or how many meal periods they missed in a day. It's still a max of 1 hour of pay. Okay. But you should have software that should track this. And if someone who's entitled to a meal or rest break doesn't take it, you pay the premium and you discipline the employee, because you do not want this to keep up, because this comes out of your bottom line. You can't bill these premiums to anybody. It's imperative that you have software to appropriately track this and to discipline employees who aren't doing things correctly.
Yeah, so that's those were all the slides, Bob. If you
Okay, great.
have a few minutes, we
Yep.
have 6 more minutes before we end this. Let's take a few more questions then.
Great. Let me go back to the question that I couldn't answer before on the split shift stuff. So you say, is there a minimum amount of time that would trigger the split shift penalty? And so it says, and it takes 30 minutes to get from one client to another. Would we pay the whole 30 minutes or the whole hour? Okay, so let's take an example here. If you have a caregiver who works from 8 a.m. to noon and then has a half an hour of travel from 12 to 12:30, and then starts working for the next client from at 12:30 to 4:30, you don't have a split shift there, because there is no unpaid gap in the workday, because you have the shift, the travel time, and the shift. However, if there is an unpaid gap that the caregiver didn't request, then you have the split shift analysis that you have to go through. Okay, and that's the way it works. Now, is there a maximum or minimum amount of time? I take the position that there's not. Okay, some may tell you, well, it's 30 minutes or less, but that's only for employees who are entitled to meal periods. Your caregivers aren't. I say if there's an unpaid break in that workday, not including consecutive overnight shifts, I'm not talking about those, but otherwise, I would trigger the split shift. Frankly, you should do the split shift analysis. It should be automated. Many of you are not going to have the split shift penalty, because if you pay sufficiently above the minimum wage, and let's face it, friends, you sort of have to get the quality of caregiver you want, then you're going to offset that split shift. Okay. So think of it this way: the more the caregiver works and the more you pay above the minimum wage, the less likely you are to pay that split shift. And also remember that split shift is the California minimum wage, which is currently $16.50, going up in January, or the local minimum wage, whichever is higher. That's the bar you have to clear. Okay. Oh, you got a question, Ruby. Hit it. There
I
you
have a
go.
question. Yes. So does your software track clock in, clock out for break periods for our employees working in a non-personal attendant capacity? Yes. We do have an option where you can configure breaks and system can track break hours, clock in and clock out of break hours for sure. I also have a couple of more thoughts here. Bob talked about rounding in the beginning. Our platform can manage all of that. So you can pay to the minute and you don't have to round, and you can pick and choose what shifts you can round in CareSmartz. Bob also talked about travel time and mileage a lot. I mean, we talked about travel time and mileage. We have a way in our platform to calculate that travel time and mileage between one shift to another shift. And you can set all these reasonable time that you want between the shifts in order to calculate that reasonable time to travel between client A and client 2. So yes, we do have options where we can ensure some compliance when it comes to payroll and your shift calculation, hour calculation and dollar value calculation. So yes.
Okay, so a couple more. So I love it. It's so it's always funny. As I said, I am friends with the other lawyers in the industry who do what I do. We are genuinely friends. We talk on a somewhat regular basis, so we don't hate each other. But we always chuckle when someone references, well, a lawyer said, and so I will say, did you say that? And they're like, I didn't say anything near that. So I'm not saying, I have no idea what was said here is accurate, right? But the question is, hey, look, I was at a conference yesterday. A lawyer mentioned that if it's a late break or short break and it was voluntary and we provide the opportunity to take that break, then you don't have to pay the meal premium. Is this accurate? I don't ever want to be in a position to put my clients in a place where they have to make arguments. Okay. If you have to make arguments, that means you're facing a claim or you've been sued. I don't like that. I would pay the premium and I would discipline the employee. Could you decide I'm not going to pay the premium and it's your fault for not taking the break? Sure, you can. That's a very aggressive posture. I think it's going to get you a claim or get you sued. And I would say the cleaner, safer, legally better task is to pay the premium and discipline the employee. If you discipline the employee and you say, look, first written warning, second final written warning, happens the third time, you're fired. Period, full stop. That's it. You're done. Okay. Are you familiar with Can Time? So I get these questions occasionally about other software. I'm not in a position to opine on them. I don't use them. I'm not a home care agency myself, so I can't tell you the ins and outs of what another software does. Okay. If someone clocks in at 5 and they are 1,000 meters from their location, how should we? Oh yes, isn't this funny? Isn't this happens all the time, right? Caregivers are somewhere way out there at the Costco parking lot, and they're saying they're in and whatever. Okay, so you take a risk as an employer if you don't pay the employee for the hours that the employee says he or she worked. Okay, so what I would tell people is you can do what's suggested here and not pay them because you believe it's fraud. That's fine, but you better be 110% sure that it's fraud. And I've had issues here where they'll say, oh, it's fraud. And they'll say, I was at the house, right? But it's maybe they were attached to a different cell phone tower or somebody else's Wi-Fi or whatever it may be. Like, I would tell you on that, I would probably pay it and I would haul the caregiver in and say, explain this, okay? Because it looks like it was fraud. Yes, go ahead.
I want to say that your software, if you're using a software, you should be able to prevent this because in CareSmartz, you can prevent clock in, or you can geofence it. So they shouldn't be able to clock in if they are 1,000 meters away from your client's home.
100%.
So it really solves the problem. That's
yes, technology is amazing. Geocaching is amazing. Yes, yes, yes. Geofencing is amazing. Yes. Okay, on this potential new client, again, it's legally Nanny. I get that. I've been doing this for 27 years. It's okay. I understand that. I'm not offended by it. But in terms of, I will let Ruby speak to the software question as far as you know what you folks can do. Your software is amazing, by the way. I was just at the Home Care Association of America conference. And I'm blown away just in a few years how platforms like CareSmartz can automate your whole back end. I mean, it's incredible what you folks do. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
We have, so I was thinking, Bob, maybe we can create a document with all these questions because there is no way we can take care of all these questions in the next, we don't have any time. We have last 2 minutes here. I'll probably just document everything, create this list of question and answers. Whatever you have answered, we'll document that, and whatever we could not answer, maybe I'll reach out to you offline and see if we can answer.
Well, no. So I want to be really clear on this, and I say this to everybody. So I want to say it publicly on this recorded webinar. I am the samples of Costco. Okay, this was the sample. I do not do any work for anyone else after this, right? If you need help, I am happy to help you. I am absolutely your guy, but not you, but the people on this call or whatever,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
want answers, they gotta retain us, because I gotta bill for my time. Because I am busier now than I've ever been. So I don't do follow-up questions or anything for anybody. This webinar is recorded. They're more than welcome to watch that. Happy to do that, give them the slides, all that fun stuff, and then call. Look, here's the thing. And I'm dead serious on this. We don't require a retainer or any money up front. I also don't have any minimum billing requirements. So if I can answer your call in a 5-minute call, answer your question in a 5-minute call, you get a bill for 0.1. Okay, that's it. And I speak quickly. So if I can help you folks, it's Legally Nanny. Like I said, we specialize in representing home care agencies, nanny agencies, and family employers. I am here in the great state of California and practice nationwide on federal legal issues. If I can help any of you with anything. By the way, I want to say thanks to all of my clients. My gosh, you guys flooded the chat. You showed up today. I'm so appreciative. I love helping this industry, and I end with this all the time. This industry helps people do good things. You maintain people's independence and dignity, and I get to help you do that. I play a little part in the good work you do, and I appreciate that. And I thank you for being here. I thank you, CareSmartz, for hosting us and all that fun stuff. Go ahead, Ruby, close it out.
Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you for your time. Thank you for everything that you do. I truly appreciate the time. And yes, to everybody, thank you so much for showing up. Yes, we will share the recorded session, and Bob's time is valuable. If you want him to answer more questions for you, please reach out to him, and we'll share all the links, contact information after this call, so you'll have everything handy to read.
And one last thing. And yes, I'm the Costco samples. I'm dead serious. We don't write newsletters. Lawyers write newsletters all the time. You're inundated with them. I don't have time to write them. You don't have time to read them. If you want to get all of our legal updates and also find out when we're speaking and doing other webinars, because we speak constantly, just follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Just Legally Nanny, and you'll get all the updates. It's the best way to do it. Okay. All right. Thanks, folks.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, again, and goodbye.
Goodbye.